Hi, Millie. Good morning from Indonesia, and I'm so glad that we get to record an episode together with two of us based in Southeast Asia. At last. I've been really looking forward to this conversation, and I was glad that we had a little preparation call as well to get to know each other a bit better. And my mind was really caught by what you described as straddling worlds between the US and Indonesia, and maybe as context setting for our listeners. I'd love if we could ask you to travel back in time to your childhood and also share a little bit about maybe some of your first memories as well.
Yeah. So I guess my story begins between literally two countries, Indonesia and then the United States. So growing up between these two cultures, it's given me sort of a unique perspective from an early age. So we moved around, I think I was around 6 or 7 years old, and I've always seen Indonesia as this, Indonesia has always taught me the importance of community, relationships, family, and understanding what we are connected to one another. And whereas United States has always, I've seen it as a way of exposing me to different ways of thinking. And it has always sort of encouraged me to be more curious and help me appreciate that the importance of asking questions and exploring new ideas. That's different from being raised in Indonesia and two cultures that are
Mhm.
just I think there was more of a culture shock from my parents because in Indonesia you're just told what to do without question. Whereas when we moved, it was, why are we doing
Wow.
this? How are we doing that? How come? And the answer is like, just do it. But no, but we're not taught that way. And so living with these two cultures really it teaches you flexibility. You learn that there are many ways really to solve problems. You learn your own perspective is not the only perspective.
Yeah.
And you learn that before you try to help others, you must learn to listen and
Yeah.
understand.
It sounds like if I can jump in, it sounds like you're almost describing two operating systems, like two software. Like you were switching from one to the other, and it was
Exactly.
quite unsettling. And I find it fascinating that you start from this kind of almost analytical perspective, almost clinical of describing one software versus another in a way. And but I'm sure emotionally and like kind of deep down, it must have been quite unsettling as well. I wonder if I ask you for one of the first memories of your childhood, like what was it like? Where were you? Who was there? What was happening?
Yeah, well, I could go back to, for example, just going to school. I think at that time I was in third grade. And prior to going over there, we lived in a small sort of area, a small, I can't say city, it's just, or a little bigger than a village, a little smaller than a city. And when you go to school, there's no buses, like big yellow buses. And I remember when we moved to the US, I've never seen a yellow bus. And I had to, they're like, oh yeah, you go to school and then we'll pick you up with a yellow bus. Just stand in front of this area and we'll pick you up. And I'm like, okay. So I go in and I'm like, where am I supposed to sit? So I just kind of sit and I waited and I'm like, okay. And just the way that the school was is very different. In my school in Indonesia, we would go to school, eat, and we go home. And then in the US, you go there and then, I had to do this Pledge of Allegiance too, and to memorize it. And that was quite unique. It took me some time. And then there was a cafeteria. I mean, it was just really interesting. And just the way um, the teachers were so really friendly. And I just waited and my first day was, when will the school end? I was looking at 12 o'clock and it went 1 o'clock. But I thought, and there were multiple recesses. And I'm like, that's quite unique. I don't know, I guess that's just my recollection of how different things were. And then the most challenging part was when I had to go home looking for that school bus. There were about 20 different. And I'm like, how am I supposed to get home? I don't know how. And so yeah, I thought it was just quite a different life, two
Yeah.
different worlds, I think. And as simple and It may sound funny, but that has sort of, stuck in my mind, just to have to see the very different worlds, two different
Yeah, yeah.
worlds at a very young age.
And what strikes me is like my first experience in the US, I was, I think, 18 or something. And
Mm.
I grew up in Switzerland, and the exuberance and the loudness and the hugs, and everybody seemed confident and wanted to make very little like powerful speeches about things, like very very extrovert. It struck me, and it contrasted me with the Swiss. And from what I know of Indonesian culture, it's much more reserved. People don't flap their arms around, and there's a lot of things are unsaid or subtle or indirect. And there's definitely not a massive hugging culture, and definitely not a culture where everybody wants to stand up on their soapbox and share their opinion. So
Right.
it's two quite extreme cultures as well. It must have been also difficult. How was it like making friends, for example?
Language was a
Yeah.
huge barrier. We didn't learn English in Indonesia, as you know. Bahasa Indonesia is our, main language. And growing up, zero English. And then, you move and all of a sudden everything is in English. And there's a funny thing. During lunchtime, they give you this menu ahead of time, yeah? And on my first day, it just so happened that hot dog was in the menu, and I translated that, and I'm like, hot dog, they're serving dogs in this school. We don't know. We eat rice, and I've never seen, and I just stayed away from it. I'm Christian Adventist who came from a very, Muslim dominated, and
And dog
just
in Islam is haram, is dirty, or is it? Yeah,
it's
there's that
in
connotation.
any and in Christian too. And it's just, I didn't know that it was beef. Yeah. And I was like, I was hungry, and I sort of starved that day because I couldn't touch it. I didn't touch it. And so that was, remember that moment. It just,
Funny Americans.
yeah. So,
Yeah, and you talked a lot about your faith, your family's faith,
mhm,
the
mhm, mhm.
Adventist church. I'd love if you could also paint a picture of that setting, what role it played, how was it like from that spiritual dimension and religious dimension as a child, how it shaped you.
Yeah. So I'm a Seventh day Adventist Christian, and so Adventist emphasizes a lot on health, education, and service, and that deeply influenced, I think, the direction of my life. I learned that faith is not only something you believe; it's something you also practice through how you treat people and how you respond to really the needs of others. Those early experiences planted foundation for, I think, my future journey into public health as well as international development.
In my life experiences, people who discover faith through
Mhm.
conversion or a powerful experience sometime in life, and then there's people who grow up in a religion or in a religious family or in a religious tradition, and for whom it's kind of normal, but at some time there's a process of like embracing where you come from. So I'm just also curious how you lived that. If you'd always embraced what you grew up with, or was there a point at which you had to kind of rediscover your faith and kind of almost like you described this American Pledge of Allegiance, but say, okay, yes, I embrace that.
Yeah. So I grew up in, I would say, a traditional Christian, Adventist Christian home. And we went to an ethnic Seventh day Adventist sort of church, an Indonesian. And I think during those moments, the church helped sort of gap the two worlds, because having to live in the United States and having difficulties to transition into an Indonesian and then an American. I think the church helped as a bridge, because it understood the Indonesian sort of cultural values, and there were also families who migrated, and so it felt like almost like I could see a little in Indonesia, things are much more strict. And then when we went to the United States, I was still a Seventh day Adventist, but things were much more open. There were more discussions, there were more questions, and it felt like a safe space, because I had kids our age going through the same struggles, going through the questioning. and also the limitation of not to ask too many questions to your parents. But we had like youth leaders in there that helped us to transition. And I think that's where I would say a newfound faith
Mm.
within my faith from Indonesia, who have moved to, it was California at that time. We lived in California. And so we're like, it's so confusing because in school we're told to ask questions. When we go home, we're told not to ask questions. And we continue to live in this sort of bipolar extremes of navigating,
Yeah, yeah.
especially as a teenager.
Of
You have
course,
so
yeah.
many,
Did
and
that
you
lead to
ask questions.
conflict? Like, how did that unfold for you?
Yeah, like for example, when you ask a certain question, like, this is what I learned in school. Well, what do you think about this? They're like, no, 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 no. Or I think, when I try to express myself, I think we should do it this way. And my parents would be like, so now that you're so smart, yeah, you have thoughts independent of yourself, and so you're no longer wanting to. I think they were also going
Yeah,
through a transition
yeah,
of how they grew up and how they
yeah,
were
yeah,
raised, and then trying to understand how their children are going through a very different
yeah,
lifestyle.
yeah.
And it was quite conflicting because yeah, in school we're asked to think, we're asked to ask questions, and then when we're asking questions at home, it's as if we were being punished.
Mm,
and
mm.
and then and then going back, in school, so we're just quiet, and the teachers would be, well, what do you think about this? What thoughts do you have? And we're like, well,
Yeah.
you know all the answers.
That's really fascinating, Millie, because this is something that fascinated me with the US as well. Is this the education that starts around people's individual opinion, even before any knowledge or any learning happens. Is you're supposed to share your opinion, and it must have been, as you described, quite jarring for your own parents, especially with Indonesian or Asian values around filial piety, and also where this idea of fostering individual opinion is quite alien as well. But I'd love to also, you talked about the power of mission stories and books from church that fascinated you as a child. I'd love if you could share what about them captured your imagination, and also how they lived on to
Mhm.
orient you in the professional world later on.
Yeah, so the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not unique to any others. We have, as Christian denomination, we have missionaries who go out to different parts of the world, and we have these what we call sort of books that guides you, and it's called Sabbath School, yeah. And it comes out every quarter, and every quarter there's always the a mission focus, and within the book there's always a map where your financial contribution will go to, either to help build schools or to help build churches. And I think at a very young age, I've always been intrigued at those maps because it transports you to different places. And every Sabbath, there was always a new story of someone from Chile, for example, or from Brazil, or in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, or Indonesia. And I've always found that really fascinating because you're able to sort of immerse yourself in the culture, and you're able to just read about kids your age that are going through, either victories or challenges. And I think that piqued my interest at a young age to travel without having to travel, because then, you're able to just read about the different stories. And I've always just imagined how, what Angola would be like, or what Italy would look like. And so those stories were found in those little lesson books, I suppose.
Hmm.
We call it the mission spotlight.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And can you share a little bit when this idea of, or this the pull towards public health began, like finding your vocation, how that happened?
I think I've always been interested in helping people, doing community service, and also just going out into just helping people. And so in high school, I've always thought, okay, so what is it that I want to do? I was quite immersed with the youth in our church, And I thought, well, maybe I can go into ministry. And I don't think that was, something that my parents had in mind. They said, oh, that's great. That's something that you want to go into, theology. But usually, women, why don't we go into the medical field? You could do that too. How about nursing? So I'm like, okay, let's try that. So I went into nursing, did my bachelor's in nursing. And then I thought, okay, maybe there's something more. It was a time when after I did nursing, I did this consultancy, and I didn't know really much about what public health was, sort of. And we were in a hospital. It was here in Indonesia, and I met with several consultants who came from the United States. They were looking at different ways of how the standards of care in birth deliveries. And that's when I met someone from John Hopkins, and I said, so what is it that you do? And she said, well, I'm in public health. And can you tell me more about that? And it was sort of from that conversation, I said, I think that's something I would really enjoy. And that's when I thought, okay, I want to pursue my master's in public health. And it was after graduation that a family friend said, well, we're posted in Guinea in West Africa. Would you be interested to come and join our work over there? And it was with Adventist Development Relief Agency. And so I said, well, that'd be interesting. And long story short, I then embarked my way to Guinea, and it was there that I think I learned so much about what public health is and what development work. Clearly, there's a lot of work to be done, and I've always also enjoyed maternal and child health, and just understanding more about the work and the healthcare system. It wasn't the easiest, but I think that's where my launching pad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love if we could zoom in a little bit on that Guinea
Mhm.
experience and maybe like what did it teach you, for example, about entering a community as an outsider, even though you were connected with faith to some degree.
Yeah, well, as you know, Guinea and West Africa is not an English speaking, it's French. I think I've always been curious and I've always just want to learn. And I jump in first without, okay, had no English, I had no French, yeah, language. And but then I thought, okay, let's just continue. And one of the challenge was trying to get through into the community. And I remembered, okay, as a young person in my middle school, I was in a girl soccer team, and I thought, okay, well, maybe that's something that I can explore. So I went out into the community, just started walking around my first few days, and that's where I spot this group of girls just playing soccer. And I thought that was so exciting because I was just observing them, yeah, and just observing how they were sort of playing. And then I thought, well, maybe I can enter into their space and just get to know them and practice French. And of course I just stood from afar, and I think one of the girls spotted me, and they came over and they're like, do you want to play? And they were so engaging, and I'm like, oh, okay. And yeah, during that time, just watching them play and having fun, and you see someone really, you know, into it, and then it was a dusty field. There was like nobody was wearing a uniform, and they had this, improvised goals, but everyone just had such a good time. And and I'm like, this is what, community is all about. This is how one should enter into the community, really trying to understand, to connect with the community in ways that it's not threatening. I'm a new person. I look different. I go in, and they just embraced me, and I thought
Mm.
that was just a unique experience because they didn't ask where I was from, what I was doing, why I was standing there. It was more like, hey, come on, let's join in and just observe their interactions with each other.
It's fascinating because it's a story that seems to have really clicked with you and provide a kind of a compass for a lot of your work and a lot of your life. And if I kind of play back what I heard is you were fascinated by community at multiple levels. One is to see how the football and those activities help the community gel and function, but also that the football was sorry, soccer as you call it, was your way in as an outsider. And then it seemed that this was also an entry point to bring service, like to start working on some of the public health as well. So I'd love if you could share as well how that entry point in a way helped orient also the actual work that you'd come for in the first place.
Yeah, I think being able to enter into the community without being seen as a threat, and you'd be surprised at how people observe you and what it is that you're doing as you enter into that community. I didn't realize, people, the homes are just around the field. And so when I was participating in the game, and without knowing the community, they were watching
Mm,
what I was doing really, and they were sort of observing my interaction with the girls. And I think that's where the parents and the community, they're like, oh, okay, she's not a threat.
mm,
She's here too. And that helped me to enter into homes of many people around the area. During that time, we were doing a project supported by USAID. It was a safe motherhood program, and we were looking at the different levels of healthcare, primary healthcare in 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 Sigiri at that time, about 8 hours or 10 hours away from the city. Conakry to Sigiri is closer to Mali, Bamako, and being able to enter into the community and being connected through the young people, I think it opened up a lot of doors for me to be to communicate different health messages to mothers and to young girls about healthcare and preventive, and having them come and bring in their children for vaccination. It's quite invasive for people to understand that, oh, vaccination is important, and but then a trust needs to be built. And I think without the trust that is made in initial phase, it's hard for any type of behavior change to happen. And I think that's the learning. I mean, I had always thought me going there I'll bring all the information, I'll bring all the knowledge, but I think I learned a lot more from the communities. The need to listen and just the need to connect with the people. They've got so much local knowledge and wisdom. And I've learned that the communities, when you listen and you hear and you understand what their issues, instead of bringing in programs,
mm,
I think we have to adjust and adapt those programs to what already exists within the community. I think that's the early learnings I received in the process of just connecting with
mm, mhm,
people. I think
mm.
oftentimes we bring so much programs after programs, and of course it's important. We've got a whole implementation plan, a detailed
Yeah, yeah,
implementation
yeah,
plan.
yeah.
From that moment, I always thought, okay, step back a little bit, understand what are the needs and how do we get these programs, not to shove it down their
Mm,
throats,
mm,
say, oh, this is really important for you, and just listen to what already exists in the community, and how the different interventions would help supplement and support the communities.
Interesting. And you also you talked about USAID as the primary donor at the time, and of course you also lived through the collapse of it as well, and the whole revolution around development. How did that feel like for you personally?
It's painful, but I think that journey has been in development. You are trained to pivot, to adapt, to be resilient, and I think the journey of with USAID, what has taught me is that you adapt, and that's what we always did. When we're out, whether we're in the desert of Africa or in the mountains of Myanmar, implementing different or providing support to different communities, is that when things change, you have to adapt, you have to pivot, and you have to find ways, and you have to trust that the communities are resilient.
Mm,
Tough times will be there, but there's always a solution. There's
mm,
always
mm,
hope. I think it's important to hold on to hope. It hasn't been an easy year, seeing a whole development structure collapse, which created a huge ripple effect in so many ways. I saw when Australians' development aid structure changed, and then I also saw how when I worked within the British Embassy, when the development structure also changed, and there were many changes and the agency adjusted, adapted. But I think what made it quite a surprise and a shock was when USA changed it. The structure changed. In a way, we were a little bit caught off guard
Mm,
because the thought was 2030. We were leading up to that. I think having work within USAID and within the mission, as well as we need to transition out. There's localization, but in a systematic way. And 2030 was the plan. And
mm,
so all the different activities were geared towards how do we localize? How do we ensure that all the work that, it's not just project, but how do we help local institutions to be strong enough and be resilient, adaptable to implement without relying solely on a donor,
mm,
one single donor. And I think in 2025, that pushed the reality even faster than 2030.
mm, mm.
It was five years earlier, I think. And now, things have changed. The global development world, the landscape has changed. And I think that's where we're seeing ways to apply
Yeah, yeah,
all
yeah,
the tools and all the learnings that we've had throughout the many years. How do we engage more of the private sector? How do we not rely only on a single source donor? I think that's the shift that we've been forced
yeah.
to do.
And thank you. And if we put the spotlight back on you as well, you worked with communities had very limited resources or were in the midst of suffering. And you probably noticed vast inequalities as well through your missions. How did that change your faith, or did it ever challenge it?
I think there are different moments and questions again that comes up, and but I think it continues to solidify the importance of service
Hmm, hmm.
because inequality it's everywhere, but what you do, the action you take to address those issues, that will determine how you want to see change happen. It's the way you react and you respond to it. It's easy to complain about why does this happen? Why does that happen? But it's more of what are you going to do about it? How are you going to respond to it? Because our response will determine how we act. And my faith, I think, guided me through the different moments where things are unclear, when things are difficult, when you can't see the end of the tunnel. I
Mm,
think that sort of anchored my faith.
mm,
I believe my faith is the anchoring. It anchored me towards seeing that yes, it's difficult. Yes, things are changing so quickly. But how do you then, it's a complex system. And even if you planned anything out today, tomorrow those plans will change.
yeah,
How do
yeah,
you plan? One thing, yeah, I've learned is plan to change. The faith that you have that there is a better tomorrow, there is a way, there is hope. I think when things are not clear, when things are messy, when you can't understand why certain things are happening or why are things so difficult, how are we going to navigate in this
yeah.
very forever changing? We're living in a world where things are just changing all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost difficult to like plan anything. But I think that's where I just reflect back and see the patterns of my life and seeing where all the different victories, I think reflecting back to those hard moments and seeing the way out gives you the hope of there is a way out,
Mm, yeah,
regardless of how difficult things are going to be.
yeah,
And we can adapt. We can be resilient. We are resilient people. And I think those are the lessons that I try to share with the people that I work with, the communities that I
yeah,
serve. And sometimes it's just a matter of, sparking
yeah,
that a little hope.
yeah.
And yeah.
It's really beautiful. If I paraphrase in my own words, it would be almost like what I would take away from our conversation is trust in my or in your intention of service, but don't be attached to a very specific outcome, and trust that things will unfold somehow, which is
Yeah.
not easy. Not easy.
No.
Millie, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I like to end our episodes with three quick fire question and answers. But before I do that, is there any question I should have asked you but didn't, or anything on your heart that you wanted to share?
Not really. I mean, I've really enjoyed this experience.
Mm.
You helped me to look back to what, 20, 30 years of my life.
Interesting.
It's quite a journey. So I know I appreciate it. I think the questions you've asked has been spot on, and
Yeah, yeah. Thanks,
yeah.
thanks. Thanks, Millie. And it's
Hmm.
funny because it's a topic that comes up a lot with guests. These connections that are made through the process of revisiting the origin, forces that shaped us and who we are today. There's something that seems to be almost therapeutic about doing this exercise. So it's interesting. So I'm going to go ahead with the three closing questions. So they are meant as the first thing on your minds, spontaneous. And so the first one is anything that you've read recently. It can be a book, an article, or even a billboard that stuck in your mind, or even maybe changed the way you see the world.
Oh gosh, I, I, I don't know. Change is inevitable.
Okay, I like that. I like that one. And then second thing is, I'm very interested in habits, rituals, daily practices, and life hacks. Is there any of those things that you practice that has improved your life?
Okay. I don't know if this is a life hack, but I would say in the busyness of our everyday life, I've been very fortunate to receive a gift of rest. Sometimes it's difficult to rest. You know, you can be physically just not doing anything, but your mind is racing 100 miles an hour. And I go back to my faith. Sometimes I felt like, oh, 24 hours of not doing anything is boring. But then as
Mm,
you get older, so as in that Seventh Day Adventist, we're encouraged to take that rest.
mm,
So from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, it's a gift of 24-hour just
mm.
mental, physical, and just emotional rest from the
Wow.
world. And it's harder now because with all the gadgets and everything.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
just
yeah.
remember in the past, the only one gadget is the television. So that's off for 24 hours. And you spend time with your family, you just reflect on the whole week.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that's a 24-hour of just disconnecting yourself
Mm,
with the world, just connecting with your family. I think that's helped me get through a lot of different challenges. And I traveled all different places, and that Friday to Saturday rest just helped me sort of connect in time with wherever my family is, because then I do my own personal worship. I believe that's a
that's
life hack
amazing.
that
That's beautiful.
everyone should take,
Beautiful.
and give that to yourself. Give it to yourself because it really it helps to just reflect
Yeah.
on a weekly basis. Mhm.
And then my last question is, what's the first thing that comes to mind if I ask about a place that has a special significance?
I would say the place where I think I was born,
Hmm.
and that's in North Sulawesi.
Wow, you were born
And
in North Sulawesi. Wow. Okay.
yes, 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 North Sulawesi, in a small little village called Lambayan. And North Sulawesi, I'm a diver, and so my special place would be in the water.
Wow.
I love the water and I love the corals. And I think that would be the place, because when you go diving, everything is just suspense in time, and it's just so quiet. And it's different from what you see from the top. And when you descend down and be able just to see, it's like this whole world down there. And so I would say that would be my
Wow,
special place.
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Millie. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me and helping and allowing me to share. I didn't realize we were going to talk about the different, more personal. I really appreciate this time. Thank you, Felipe.